Hey, everybody. I am going back to our webinar. Well, hello, everybody. I hope you are having a good evening. I hope that this time finds you happy and healthy. And I want to welcome you to our reboot of the TAP Talks. And I want to tell you a little bit about that, share what we do on TAP Talks, and get started with today's topic, which is Research Roundup. I'm going to share my screen. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so as you can see, there we go. As you can see, we're here at the Triangle Aphasia Project home office, and we welcome you to TAP Talks. TAP Talks was introduced actually when we were in person, pre-COVID, years ago, when we really found that people had a lot of questions, education ideas, things that they had heard about maybe in inpatient rehab, started to learn this new vocabulary, but wanted to find a way to be able to ask those questions. And what would happen is that somebody in one of the groups would make a comment about, hey, I just went to see an acupuncturist. You did? Well, does that help with aphasia? Does that help with stroke recovery? And so we would start looking up some things. And then we found out there were people right here in our community. So we invited them in for talks. We also had TAP Talks that were motivating and inspiring, wonderful presentations by stroke heroes that came in to teach us about their journey and inspire us for ours. And we wanted to reintroduce that. Last year, 2 years ago in 2020, time flies when you're in a pandemic, we started TAP Talks again, and we would have guest speakers and content that you would find helpful. It is an opportunity for not just education, but to exchange knowledge with people who know different things than we do. It's also a great way to connect you to resources. So many things that we're missing about this in-person, beautiful family and community that we have is that we would share resources, ideas, favorite restaurants even. And those things are really hard to do when you're only connecting via Zoom and mainly the clients themselves. So, TAP Talk topics. This really is up to you. Do you have a topic that you might be interested in? What do you want to know about? What would help you along this aphasia journey? Would you like to talk to a nutritionist? Would you like to talk to, we've had ones on adaptive sports, told you on acupuncture, on wellness, on coping, on just inspirational ones. What would help you? If you have an idea, go ahead and put it right in those comments, the question and answers that are below that you can see here on the webinar, or put them in the Facebook comments. I will look at all of those afterwards, or send me an email, mara@aphasiaproject.org. We want to provide you with what you need. I will tell you that one of the greatest parts about, let's see if I can move this panel a little bit here. The greatest thing that we miss are our people in person. And we serve individuals with aphasia from now across the entire state of North Carolina. And I'll tell you something about our clients, which you may already know. They are awesome. They are our heroes. They are so, they're like a sponge. Tell me what I can do. And they help each other and connect each other. What they do is they want to make a difference. They want to be the advocates. They want to teach, whether it's a graduate intern that's visiting our group, an observer, or down at the legislative building when we used to be able to go down in June for National Aphasia Awareness Month. We'll get back there. It is the people with aphasia that will teach us the greatest lessons about how we can serve them better. So our first TAP Talk, our kind of kickoff or reboot, is going to be called Research Roundup. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about this. We've done one on research before. As a matter of fact, we had a wonderful presentation by Dr. Adam Jacks here at UNC Chapel Hill, and he presented us with amazing research that they were doing, but also kind of some background that people may not know about research. I didn't know that not only does it allow us to learn things, but it helps us to identify risks and benefits and to understand those. So you can decide, with an education and a support, if you are able and willing to participate in some research opportunities. One thing that they reminded me when I kind of touched base with my research colleagues in the field is to remind you that aphasia research that you might get involved in, or stroke research or PPA research, may not help you directly, but it may help the next person. Doesn't mean it won't help you, but just that's something to be aware of. Dr. Jacks and Dr. Haley and Dr. Richardson and all of our friends that have collaborated with TAP for years told me that it was really important that people with aphasia knew that they needed to ask some questions, that the idea of this is a process, and that being able to ask the right questions are important. So I asked them, what are the right questions to ask? Here's some of the ones that they provided me with. Number one, what is this study about? What are you trying to do? What is the purpose? What do you want to find out by studying this particular situation? How long will it last? Is this something that I just do once and I'm done? Is it something that I'm going to do and then come back in 6 months or a year or so on? I think really important right now during COVID is, what's the safety piece? Am I going to be doing it from my home, which many studies are using Zoom or some type of virtual platform? But asking somebody, what will I do? What do I need to do to participate in this study? Do I need to come to a clinic? Do I need to go through some testing? And then what will you going to do with the information? How will this information be used? What's really great is that all of these questions have to be answered in what's called an IRB, and that is where somebody reviews, this panel reviews to determine that it's safe and it's followed all these questions and answers. Another question is, what do I get out of it? And I don't mean as, am I going to, get paid? Because some studies do offer a little bit of a stipend or help you with gas. Some even will fly you to where they are to complete the study. But what results will I get? I know that one of the frustrations that people that I know who have participated in research have said is, I want to know the results of all those tests. I sat there for hours and, did language testing. Can you give me that feedback? How am I doing? It's a great way to kind of find out where you are along the continuum of your recovery. So that's really important. And then what are the risks? Many of the programs that we're talking about, the research that we're involved in, have little to no risk, but you should ask, what the risks are. The other thing that my colleagues in the research areas talked about was informed consent. Now think about consent as not just, hey, do you agree to do this? Yes or no. But it's more of a process. It's something where the researcher is getting permission from the participants in a back and forth dialogue, in a discussion. It should be done with very clear everyday terms. Many times as professionals, we use, terminology that you're not familiar with. How would you be? But you should ask, what does this mean? How does this impact me? You also want to have opportunity for discussion and questions. And you should know what the results are going to be in terms of privacy. Most studies will use first initials or just, not their full name, but you should know the parameters of privacy for your data, for the information you're giving them. And it needs to be accessible. This is something that's really important to myself and the other group leaders at TAP, is that you have a way of telling your story, a way of saying yes and no, but not just saying yes or no or communicating yes or no, but really being able to understand. That requires a lot of aphasia-friendly materials. Most of the time when you work with a study of aphasia, they will already have aphasia-friendly releases or consent paperwork. That might be something as simple as, we're going to use the computer. We are going to use this for education, to show pictures that support the language. And then there has to be a way of saying, yes, no, I don't know, I need more information. So it is essential that people with aphasia, even if it's just the use of, our whiteboard and a marker and crossing off things and circling them, it's really important to connect that. So informed consent means you know and you agree. So how do you find research studies? Well, actually, this is why I'm doing this as one of the primary TAP talks. Is TAPUnlimited has a reputation for having the best clients. Sorry, all of other aphasia centers in the whole country, but we're great. They're great, and they like to help. So a lot of times we get asked, would you share this with your clients? And I know they're shared all over. Will you share this study? Would you send this out on eye contact or your newsletter? One of the things I know, because I always hound y'all, is did you look at your eye contact? Did you read your newsletter? Is it's a lot of information. And maybe you happen to miss one that had really good information that you wanted. So how do you find a safe, vetted, reliable study for you to participate in if you so desire? Well, what's great is that there are a lot of resources. The very first one that I'm going to remind you of is the one through our government, which is clinicaltrials.gov. The NIH and the clinicaltrials.gov provide opportunities for you to search aphasia, stroke, and speech, whatever you want, and see you can find what studies are going on in this country. You can also find information on sites like the National Aphasia Association, aphasia.org. I just saw a wonderful presentation on primary progressive aphasia from Dr. Maya Henry as one of the expert ones, and she was talking about studies that they were doing, which I'm actually going to share one of them with you today. But reaching out to those places, reaching out to universities, which we'll talk about in a second. Aphasia Access, this is a life participation program or group that got started. Actually, TAP was one of the founding members, where there are speech pathologists, professionals who are dedicated to a life participation model. There are fantastic resources and fantastic professors and researchers and people at every university across the country. And they might be looking for stuff. You might find something on Aphasia Recovery Connection or on our Facebook page, on other Facebook page. We do our best to share them. The university programs, well, we have a university right here that has a speech pathology program. We actually have the NCCU, UNC, ECU, app. All of these programs have aphasia, Western Carolina, UNCG, as we'll learn a little bit about today. So there are programs. One of the great recommendations that Dr. Jack sent along was that there's actually a registry. You know what a registry is, not picking out your china for your wedding, but a registry where you can say, hey, this is who I am. I've had a stroke, I have aphasia, and I really am interested in knowing when studies are becoming available. Or I have PPA and have aphasia, whatever your diagnosis is. But if you have aphasia, this last piece right here, http://aphasia.unc.edu/registry is where you go. And don't worry about copying these down. I'm going to send you all this and make this a PDF available to you. So as I said, Triangle Aphasia Project is not only my heart, but it holds a special place in the country. But there are programs all across the country that are doing amazing research, and we want you to be aware of that. So how do we spread the word? Well, we spread the word by having something like this. And I'll tell you that one of the specific reasons I did this is because I get emails from some of my colleagues that I'm on committees with or that I enjoy educational discussions with, and they say, hey, would you share this? And I'm afraid of that not really getting the attention that it needs. But I'm also realizing that it's not an exhaustive list. So what I decided to do is these people who have specifically asked me to share a study, I'm going to tell you about those studies. But we're finding a way at TAP to have a platform that we can send you to studies when they come into us. And there'll be more on that as we go along. You should know that it's ever changing. Sometimes there is a study that's done and then a new study is going on. The UNC HTTP site there, that website, you can actually find a bunch of different studies that are going on. Sometimes the studies we get are not aphasia related, but they might be stroke related or FTD related or ambulation, moving, right hemiparesis, any of those things that we might have clients that are interested in, we get back in touch with them. So by me sharing with you today these studies, just a smattering of the studies that are available, I am not in any way, or TAP is not in any way, endorsing any one of these studies or in any way requesting your involvement in them. We just want you to know what's available and what people have asked us to share. Again, no need to take notes. Very hard to write down websites sometimes. So I am putting together a PDF and a handout that will follow up this discussion. So let's talk about some of the studies. One of my favorite studies that are going on right now, and it's really just one of the many studies on friendship, but this is a particular interest in friendship. And if you were in the TAP Inspire group on Monday, I had to stop in the middle and say, oh my gosh, you guys are just sharing the best things. Can I record this? And of course, everybody was very amenable to that and said, absolutely. And the discussion of friendship was both inspiring and heartbreaking. It was very authentic and vulnerable, with our clients sharing some of the things that happen with their own friends and why they think that individuals did not stay related to them in that friendship manner. We also talked about new friends, and we talked about the community of TAP and how that became a group of friends, which I thought was really just beautiful and heartwarming. This particular study, I thought I would give you a couple little things that requirements and then tell you a little bit more about it, is that you must speak English and you must be a spouse or significant other of somebody with aphasia. It is a Zoom meeting and it takes about 1 hour. It's an interview on Zoom, and their whole goal is to help people with aphasia maintain friendships. You know, at TAP, we talk a lot about training, and that the more training that's available for people in the early parts of their journey with aphasia is significant in them being able to maintain the friendships. In TAP Inspire last week, people talked about feeling that they thought their friends felt uncomfortable or awkward around them. And it is like having somebody who speaks a foreign language. We need to know what that language is like. So I'm going to share a little video that they sent me to share with you about their friendship study.
Hello, I'd like to share with you some information about a research project about friendship and aphasia. I hope you might join us. Here is our research team. Brent Archer from Bowling Green State University, Natalie Douglas from Central Michigan University, Jamie Azios from Lamar University, and I'm Katie Strong from Central Michigan University. We would like to invite you to participate in a research project. We want to learn from you and find out how to help people with aphasia keep their friendships strong and healthy. Who can participate? You must speak English, and you must have a diagnosis of aphasia from a doctor or speech-language pathologist. What would I do? You would meet with one of us to talk about your experiences with friendship so we can learn from you. How much time would it take? The interview would last 1 to 2 hours. Where will this happen? The interview will be on Zoom. You must have a computer or smartphone with a camera and internet connection. We can help you set this up. What are the potential benefits to society? We hope to help people with aphasia maintain their friendships. For more information about the project, please contact Nora. Her email is here, and I will put it in the comments on Facebook. We hope you'll join us in this project.
So we were thrilled that we had a little video, and you can see that it answered the same questions that we talked about having important when you were talking about research. What I also love about this program, particularly this study, is that is part of a program called Project Bridge. Project Bridge is when people with aphasia work directly with the researchers that are studying aphasia. They actually choose the topic and participate in the design of a study. There are some bridge studies going on all across the United States, including ones on yoga and meditation, on friendship. These were all things that people with aphasia found important. There's another study that is being done on coping. I was really happy that Dr. Haley sent me this information from a colleague in Georgia. Its intent is to create a coping questionnaire for people with aphasia. Very timely, since this is kind of thing we're going to talk a little bit about today. The requirements are a person has to have aphasia and their caregivers, and they have to be over 18 years old. They have to have had a left hemisphere stroke with aphasia. And that doesn't mean that people that have aphasia from another cause aren't experiencing coping challenges. It's just this is what this study is about. That they have no communication impairment or neurological disease prior to their stroke, and that they also have internet and Zoom, because it's going to take about an hour and a half. This study is being done by the Aphasia and Motor Speech Disorders Lab in Georgia State at Georgia State University. And Dr. Gore is wonderful. And I think that she would really love if you were interested in participating in that. There is another study that's fairly local and was also shared with TAP, and a request to send it out. One of the difficult parts about this particular study, and I have contacted them to see if there's additional studies on equity, is that this is for a stroke within 6 months. And as you know, many of the times we get people that are joining TAP, it's after that 6-month period or early on, but not exactly 6 months. So I have gotten in touch with them, so stay tuned. But this is a study that wants to help better understand the relationship between the presence, strength, and satisfaction of social networks and stroke outcomes in African Americans and white stroke survivors residing in the Eastern North Carolina stroke belt. You may have heard of the stroke belt before. The stroke belt is specific about how there's more strokes in our area of North Carolina, if you kind of put a belt across the state. The importance of social networks and outcomes and life satisfaction and coping, you can see are a redundant theme in the studies that are going on right now. This equity study is being done by Dr. Charles Ellis and Dr. Molly Jacobs, who are at ECU, actually. So I have contacted them to ask them what other studies they might be doing. Dr. Ellis does some amazing work with the cost of aphasia and the cost of stroke, and has been very important in our field for discussing that area. As you know, we don't just serve people with aphasia from stroke or traumatic brain injury. We also serve people who have primary progressive aphasia. Primary progressive aphasia is under the umbrella of frontotemporal dementias and has impacted not just language, but also speech. And there's a wonderful team that is working on improving diagnostic methods. I will say that we're seeing more and more diagnosis of PPA in a timely fashion to allow us as providers to really help those families. I remember when I started TAP, there were people that were telling me that they were waiting 6 years before they were getting a good diagnosis, and that many people were misdiagnosing it as Alzheimer's or other cognitive deficits, while language was the only thing at that time. We do know that it does affect cognition afterwards. So this is a study that's looking for people with PPA. They will receive a detailed speech and language evaluation and $50. It is another online platform, internet, and it takes about 2.5 hours. And I'm sure they'll be willing to look at the how long spreading that out. These are our wonderful colleagues that are doing this: Dr. Katarina Haley, Dr. Adam Jacks, Dr. Jessica Richardson, who used to be at USC and now is in University of New Mexico, and Dr. Maya Henry, who is the one that I was telling you about that did the NAA expert one. If you're interested in that study, that is also put on the UNC website about aphasia studies. I wanted to mention, before we kind of get into our guests today, is that there's often projects that aren't necessarily full research studies, but that are really important and can really kick off a study. And those are called CAPSTONE projects. CAPSTONE means that it's a project that's multifaceted and often happens at the culmination of an academic experience. So our graduate interns often are doing some type of capstone project. There's 2 that have been discussed and sent to the TAP office asking them to share. One is somebody you might recognize if you're involved in TAP. Her name is Laura, and she was one of our graduate students last semester. She has come up with a survey for caregivers of individuals with aphasia and is looking at social communication skills secondary to isolation of COVID-19. I think you will see many, many studies in the next couple of years on what this pandemic has resulted in. I often tell people that our whole mission is to reduce social isolation and improve life participation. kind of hard to do when you're on lockdown, right? So we are noticing that it is essential that people stay active and involved, which is why we so hope that you, if you're looking at this today, are also involved in the Tap at Home programs that are available now through the entire state of North Carolina. I will send you this link if you wouldn't mind helping Laura do this survey. There is also a program at UNCG with one of my colleagues, Sina Crutchley, who is looking at, and I'm really excited about helping her with this, is creating up-to-date video tutorials demonstrating communication strategies to educate families and caregivers and healthcare workers. We are doing a lot in the area of education and training, and we have big plans for getting that information out into the community. What this will do is kind of show the right way and the wrong way. So having a communication interaction, showing where it broke down and showing how to fix it. So I'm really excited about that as well. So without further ado, if they are still there, I have them shut off with sound and video, but I'm really excited to introduce you to two of my colleagues that I have been able to enjoy early Friday morning conversations with. Dr. Jessica Obermeyer, who is at UNCG and focusing on treatment development and discourse production in aphasia. And Kate Keller, who is a PhD student at UNCG and at Western Carolina, and has a particular interest in counseling and aphasia. So before we hear a little bit more about them, let's hear about what they're going to be talking about today. And then I'll stop sharing. I'm hoping you guys are thinking of questions and concerns that you might want. You can put them right there in the question box or on the comments, and we will get to them. What we're going to be talking about with these two lovely ladies late into the evening here on a, what is it, Wednesday, is that we know that there are changes with people with aphasia after a stroke or brain injury, and that affect emotions and their roles and adjustment and coping and depression. And here's the big question: what's stopping persons with aphasia from seeking help? So I am going to stop sharing my screen. I am going to welcome these ladies. Thank you for your patience while we talk about some of the other research programs that are available here. I credit Zoom for allowing us, and you know, if the pandemic has brought us anything, its ability to connect with you guys. And I've just enjoyed so much our very passionate early morning discussions. So before we talk about some specifics, I was just wondering if you can each just give us a little more information about your interest in aphasia. Jessica?
Of course, yes. It takes a lot to get me excited at 8 a.m., but talking about research projects with Mara and Kate has done it. So we have some great chats. My name is Jessica Obermeyer. I am an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I'm in my third year there, so I'm relatively new to the university and to North Carolina. And I have been interested in aphasia since I became a speech pathologist, since even before I became a speech pathologist. I think the first video I ever saw of someone with aphasia, I thought to myself, that's what I want to focus on in my career. And that's, you know, I would love to help people communicate their thoughts and their feelings. And that's why I wanted to be a speech pathologist, because I care a lot about communication and want to help people make those connections. In my research, I am really interested in developing and testing treatments for people with aphasia. So these are just the types of treatments you get when you go to speech therapy. And within that, I really enjoy working on complex language, like telling stories or describing an event, or writing an email, or writing a description of something. So I'm interested in putting together lots of language and helping people to do that through treatment.
I love that. I love that your focus is everything that you mentioned: writing an email, doing these things that are functional and life participation, telling stories. I'm hoping you believe, like I do, I know you do, that the days of drill and what's this and what's this, and, you know, getting this like box of names, you know, has just been not shown to be anything that really helps a person.
Not how we talk.
No, it's not how we talk. All right,
we
well,
don't just name things.
That's right. I always say, when I give my training, I always say, I have not been to a restaurant lately. Well, I haven't been to a restaurant lately, but when I used to go to a restaurant, I would never sit there and say plate, fork, light, table, but my speech therapist might be drilling those things. So exactly. Welcome, Jessica, and I can't wait to have this little discussion with you. And we're going to also kind of tell them about the study that we're all working on together. So, but first, let's introduce Kate. Kate, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I'm a PhD student, and I have just been completely in awe of working with Mara and Jessica and all of these really wonderful speech therapists through this process. I am not like Jessica in that when I was in graduate school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I thought that I really wanted to work with children. And over a 15-year career, I have really loved working with adults. I think that the draw for me in working in all the different systems, I've worked in school systems, in private practice, and outpatient, and inpatient. I've worked in acute, I've worked in skilled nursing facilities, and the systemic issues that I see, and those things that are very frustrating for the people that, you know, I've worked with. I feel like the life participation model, I feel like this is really getting it. This is what we need in healthcare. We need it in our profession. And getting my PhD has just kind of been this journey that I'm able to really conceptualize and see where this is coming from. What are the roots of LPAA, and what are we really doing to help? And are we helping? And that's really where this study that we are trying to implement is coming into play.
I love that. And I think, just for the knowledge of everybody that's out there, life participation approach. Now, people have talked about saying life participation approach versus life participation approach to aphasia, because it should be about any programming that we do with people who have communication difficulties, is to look at their life and find out where are the barriers, what's breaking down, finding how this communication disorder has impacted their life. And I think that's where we kind of started our discussion about it goes beyond language, right? That people have been impacted. There are, you know, I'm looking at the white paper here from Aphasia Access, or studies upon studies of impaired mood and depression and difficulty coping, and how to deal with some of those things with aphasia, but also just the statistics. Can either of you share some of what we know about that?
So the research right now is really focusing on these negative mood changes that are inherent with aphasia. It's really a natural part of having a stroke, but also the trauma of the stroke, the trauma of dealing with, what's going to happen next and what's this new normal. And when we talk about negative mood changes, we're talking about depression and anxiety, but we're also talking about just a fear. We're talking about your relationships and how you're navigating this through with your partner or with your family or with your friends. So we're talking about all of the emotions that come into play when you have aphasia. The difficulty right now is, one, in expressing those emotions, but two, in the way that the current professionals know how to handle it. So the research right now is really asking, or it has asked speech therapists how they direct or how they deal with emotion and mood, and how mental health professionals deal with it. But there aren't many studies that are asking people with aphasia how they perceive counseling, what they think about counseling, if they are even open to it. So we're just kind of feeling like it's time to ask people with aphasia and their care partners how they feel and what their experience is.
I wanted to clarify some of the statistics on this before we move forward, because I totally agree with what you're saying. But is a person who has aphasia secondary to stroke more likely to have impaired mood than somebody who has had a stroke but does not have a communication impairment?
Yes. So the statistics for stroke are usually around 30%, but with aphasia, it can be up to 60 to 70% of people with depression. Anxiety is around the same. People with aphasia are at a much higher risk for developing anxiety as a result of the stroke and aphasia.
And I wondered if, Jessica, you can talk to this too, is this risk of depression and mood changes and stuff. The one statistic that really hit me hard was the difference between how long depression lasts for. So, most people have these immediate mood changes for like 3 months. So 65% will have it at 3 months, right? But with aphasia, I know Hudson et al. Did a study that talked about 42% of people with aphasia a year post-stroke, post having aphasia, are still have the same, consider themselves at that same level. And that's not the same with other people's recovery.
Absolutely. I mean, we see across the board with these statistics that having aphasia puts you at a greater risk for having, depression after stroke, and for that lasting longer. Sorry. And not just depression, but those mood changes. I just want to circle back around to what Kate was saying. I think a lot of people think of depression in a certain way, that you're sad every day, that you can't get out of bed, but it's even bigger than that. It can be feeling anxiety about recovery, about, your daily life, about being able to return to your daily life. So it's a bigger picture than I think some people think it is.
Yeah. And I wonder how much COVID has impacted that, and the pandemic, and being separated from the very social activities that we are trying to get somebody to return to.
Yeah, I think that those studies are yet to be done and published. We don't know the statistics on that yet, but absolutely. I mean, the wellness of just people in general is so multifaceted. It's not just, if you're stable in your home, it's your social environment, your occupation. It's so multifactorial. So
Right.
if, when there is just one really large event that is out of our control, we have no power over this COVID thing, or what power we do have seems very small and minimal. That can really affect people. And I think that in my studies, in my personal experience, the balance of power and responsibility is really how mental health kind of, how I feel about mental health. When you feel so much responsibility, but you're powerless to do anything about it, then that's going to put you in a really dark place. But if you can kind of understand what power you do have in a certain situation, then you can really start to see the light a little bit and see the hope and what you can be responsible for. It feels a little bit more manageable. But I think
love that. I love how you describe that. I'm sorry.
I think right now, I think everybody's, kind of in survival mode, and that's hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So who are they talking to? I mean, you used a great term when we were talking one morning about how speech therapists are kind of communication brokers. I think that's a fascinating concept because my colleagues and myself have said, we're the safe place. Oftentimes, they're not telling the physical therapist, they're not telling the occupational therapist, they may not even be telling anyone in their family. But when we can access communication and we can start to pull some of that language out, wow, what do you guys are hearing?
Yes, absolutely.
Speech therapists are the ones who listen.
Yeah. We try.
We're good listeners.
Yeah.
And it's really important. I mean, speech therapists are the front line, in the hospital, they're the first person to say, oh, okay, let me help you with this. I know what this is. I understand, the intricacies and the underlying pathology of this. So it's just person important, not only for the speech therapists to understand that their impact is not just with the people, with a person with aphasia and their caregiver. It's also with all the doctors and the nurses and training care partners and training communication partners.
So we really are the communication broker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the speech pathologist, they're often the ones who I think take on the role of advocate for their clients first maybe before some other therapists do, because we are the ones that are listening first and trying to get to the bottom of someone's situation, trying to understand their communication, trying to support it. And that just puts you into that advocate role from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
It's a big honor, isn't it? Like
It is, and a big responsibility.
It is. It's a big honor and it's a big responsibility. I think that when TAP clients and their families, connect and say, hey, I'm having trouble. I feel like that is, I trust you, I believe in you and what your program can help and offer us. So speaking of which, maybe we could spend a couple of minutes just talking about this study and what we would like to have TAP clients participate in if they choose. Obviously, we talked about that is completely their choice. And then I'd love to leave like 5 minutes for questions. And there's one question already in the Q&A, but please drop a question in here. And while you guys are talking a little about the study, I'll see if there's any comments on Facebook too.
So the study is going to be 3 to 4 virtual sessions, so you can do it from the comfort of your home. We are going to do sessions with people with aphasia, but we'd also like to do separate sessions with caregivers because we know that the experience is the same in some ways and very different in other ways. So we would love to sit down and talk with you about the knowledge you have about counseling, your experience, and your perceptions of what it is. So 3 to 4 sessions, and they'll be about 30 minutes to an hour. They shouldn't be that long, but we'll be happy to schedule you at your convenience.
Can you answer some of the questions that we talked about in the beginning of this? Is like, what do we hope to find out by doing this study? And because you've answered like, the amount of time and who's going to do it and that, but what is the goal here?
I think the biggest goal for us is to figure out from people with aphasia, what opportunities they're presented with to access mental health care, and what potential things are keeping them from accessing it. So is it that they went to someone and they felt like they had some communication breakdown? Is it that nobody ever mentioned mental health in the first place? What are things that are keeping them from accessing those services?
So important. So what's the barrier? What's in your way? You know, and if there's anybody out there too, if they want to share, you know, what do you think is going to be some of the things that we find out?
Yeah.
We have,
and that's what we're really looking at. So participation in this study is really going to be about having a conversation with us about your experiences and your feelings about the opportunities you've had. And we'll do that through interviews and also some surveys where we ask you a question and you have options that you can select.
That's great. I know that we will have a big interest in this. And I do think that we're going to get a lot of information that's going to really add to the field and add to finding out where some of the breakdowns are. There was a question, one question from the audience here asking about how we communicate successfully with somebody with aphasia via Zoom. And I'm going to broaden that a little bit to say that a lot of our folks are only able to connect with their family near and far. They may not be traveling, they may be, you know, on FaceTime, or they may be on Zoom. And as speech pathologists, we know that there's already things that are barriers. You know, it's harder to attend, it's harder to listen. You can see their mouth, there's a timing. I mean, we've talked over each other a couple times, you know, there's that. What have you guys seen? And we can all talk about that.
I think one of the best things about Zoom, so there's tons of challenges using Zoom and trying to support people, but one of the best things is that we're in each other's homes and we don't usually get to be. So we can show everything in our environment. If you're trying to talk about your dog, let's see the dog. You already saw my dog. So, you know, we have that context to support our communication. So I think that that's a huge benefit to Zoom. Maybe one of the only ones, but it is a help. And like Mara was showing us earlier, using those keywords and writing things down, I think that's a big help over Zoom as well.
That's always a big one too for the advocacy role of the person with aphasia. And because we, for example, at TAP, we don't break up our groups based on somebody's level of communication impairment. So they may have more comprehension deficits than their neighbor here in the next screen. And what I love to see is people saying, can you tell me again? Or using that attention getter, or saying, I didn't understand that, along with the supports and the cues. But I also really appreciate what you're saying, Jessica, about context, about even just the vulnerability and humility and amazing access that people have given by showing up in their home. You know, I mean, I saw your dog crawl up on your lap, you know.
Yes.
Could have been your baby and crawling up on that, you know, it really does. I mean, we've had people have half an hour long conversation about the picture that was behind somebody on the wall. So Kate, did you have a thought on that too?
I was just going to say, yeah, we'll do everything we can. We have pictures too to help communicate and really to make that interaction as interactive as possible. So we have developed a few tools over the last 2 years because, you know, we're all trying to manage this new technology.
And we already have some people that are interested. Thank you, Tony. I was hoping that you would pipe in. We really just have an amazing community of people. And I know that when they hear of, you know, the passion behind your program, they will do what they can. And, you know, with us wrapping up the discussion, I want to see if you have anything further, anything that you just want to say to the TAP audience before we sign off, Kate?
I just want to encourage you. I want to ask you, you know, I've been reading on this PhD journey. It's just all about reading, and I'm reading all of these, you know, projections of why people are not doing this and what their experience is. But I really just want to ask you. I want to ask you, and I want to ask your caregiver or your care partner, because you're the reason we do it.
Totally. I love that. Jessica?
Absolutely. It's hard to follow up on that. I mean, I think we as a field need to be asking people with aphasia more things.
Yes.
We need to know what their lived experience is, and we need to use that to inform what we're doing as a profession, as speech pathologists. So I think we've got a lot of catch up to do.
Yeah. It's not an ivory tower that we're doing. You know, it's you all, and it's integrating. So you know, I want to thank both of you for either early morning or late evening, I guess, when we can get together. But I feel like TAP has been so fortunate to extend our, you know, reach to all different areas in North Carolina because we have this ability to be virtual. But just your openness and your ideas and your willingness to include and be inclusive. And I've really enjoyed working with you guys. I know I'm really looking forward to this project.
Thank you so much, Maura. Thank you.
Of course. And I want to thank all of you who took the time to watch this. We did record it. We will be able to offer playback for people. We will be following up with a PDF with all of the studies that we talked about here, but also a platform of keeping you involved and knowing what is going on. Research, reboot and regroup and refresh is all happening. So thank you all. Have a good evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.